Hey, honey. Know that our son is going to Canada to play hockey. We didn't want any kind of long, drawn-out goodbye, so I dropped him off at the airport. Of course, we may never see our son again.
Get the fuck down! Get the fuck down! This is your man! Over for step, Billy! Get this one! Get your gun!
You can do this.
Brendan! Brendan!
The movie introduces Nick Hume, a mild-mannered executive working as a vice president for an insurance company in North Carolina. Nick lives a structured and happy life with his wife Helen and their two sons, Brendan and Lucas. He is a man who values order and balance, often viewing life through the lens of balanced accounts and proper procedure. Brendan, the older son, is a talented high school hockey player who has recently reached a professional level. His younger brother, Lucas, is more emotional and possesses a passion for art. While the two brothers occasionally engage in typical sibling rivalries, they share a close and supportive bond. After a successful hockey game where Brendan performs exceptionally well, Nick drives him home. During the drive, Brendan expresses his ambition to move to Canada to further his hockey career, a plan that Nick fully supports. As they navigate through a high-crime neighborhood, they encounter two cars driving erratically with their headlights off. Nick flashes his lights at the passing vehicles to alert them, unaware of the danger they represent. Shortly after, Nick realizes they are low on fuel and pulls into a gas station. While Nick remains at the pump to fill the tank and speak with Helen on the phone, Brendan heads inside the station's store to buy a drink. While Brendan is inside, the two cars they encountered earlier arrive at the station. Several gang members exit the vehicles with the intention of robbing the store. When the store owner attempts to reach for his own firearm to defend the business, the gang members quickly spot him and shoot him to death. The gang has a ritual where new members must commit a murder to prove their worthiness. A new member named Joe is ordered by the gang leader to kill Brendan, who is an innocent witness to the robbery. Despite Joe's initial hesitation and fear, he eventually follows the order and slits Brendan's throat with a machete. Nick witnesses the brutal attack through the store window and rushes toward the building. As the gang members flee, Nick manages to tackle Joe and pull off his mask, revealing the young man's face. Joe manages to break free and run into the street, where he is accidentally struck by a passing car. Despite the impact, Joe manages to escape the scene, leaving Nick to attend to his dying son. Nick desperately rushes Brendan to the hospital, but the injuries are too severe. The medical staff is unable to save him, and Brendan is pronounced dead, leaving the Hume family in a state of profound grief. Following Brendan's funeral, Nick meets with Detective Wallace and the district attorney to discuss the legal proceedings against Joe. Nick has already positively identified Joe as the killer during a police lineup. However, the district attorney explains that the lack of physical evidence and a broken security camera at the gas station make a trial difficult. The prosecutor informs Nick that the defense will likely negotiate a plea deal. Because Joe has no prior criminal record, this deal would result in a sentence of only a few years in prison. Nick is deeply disturbed by the idea that his son's life is being treated as a minor legal matter. At the pre-trial hearing, the judge asks Nick to testify and confirm Joe's identity as the murderer. To the shock of the courtroom and his own family, Nick chooses to lie, stating that it was too dark to see the killer's face. As a result of this lack of identification, the judge is forced to dismiss the case. Joe is released immediately and joins his gang members waiting outside the courthouse. The gang leader, Billy, who is also Joe's older brother, praises Joe for the killing and tells him he has now become a man. Nick watches them from his car, having intentionally set Joe free so he can deliver his own form of justice. Later that night, Nick tracks Joe to an apartment complex. He tells his family he is going back to his office to pick something up, but he instead goes to confront the killer. Nick waits for Joe to emerge from the building and initiates a violent confrontation. During the struggle, Nick manages to overpower Joe and stabs him to death. Nick is shaken by his own actions and quickly flees the scene, disposing of the weapon in a remote area. When he returns home, Helen notices his injured hand, but Nick remains silent about what he has done. The next day, Detective Wallace visits Nick at his office to inform him that Joe has been found dead. She notices the bandage on Nick's hand and suspects he is involved in a retaliatory act. Meanwhile, Billy learns of his brother's murder and becomes enraged, swearing to find the person responsible. The gang gathers at a local bar to toast to Joe's memory, treating him as a fallen soldier. Billy berates his men for their lack of respect before turning his attention to finding the killer. One member mentions that his sister saw a man in a suit near the apartment on the night of the murder. After seeing Nick's photo in a newspaper, the gang confirms he is the person who killed Joe. Billy and his right-hand man, Bodie, begin tracking Nick as he walks through the city. Just as Bodie prepares to shoot him, Nick notices the threat and uses his briefcase to defend himself. This leads to a chaotic shootout in a crowded public street. Nick flees into a narrow alleyway while several gang members pursue him from different directions. During the chase, Nick is forced to abandon his briefcase to increase his speed and evade the gunfire. Nick eventually enters a multi-story parking garage to hide from his pursuers. To confuse the gang, he begins triggering car alarms throughout the building. He reaches the top floor, but one of the thugs corners him inside a vehicle. As the car reverses rapidly toward the edge of the parking structure, Nick jumps out at the last second, the car plummeting several stories to the ground, killing the gang member inside. Following the incident, Detective Wallace arrives at the scene and realizes that Nick is now in an open war with the gang. Nick receives a call from Helen informing him that Lucas has disappeared. He finds his younger son at the gas station where Brendan was killed. Lucas is devastated and expresses his resentment toward Nick, feeling that his father only ever cared about Brendan. The following day, Bodie enters Nick's office and returns the briefcase he dropped during the chase. Inside, Nick finds a family photo, which serves as a silent threat that the gang is targeting his entire family. Bodie warns Nick that he has the right to know how he is going to die before being escorted out by security. Nick calls a phone number found in the returned briefcase, which connects him directly to Billy. Billy explains that Joe was his brother and warns Nick that he has essentially bought a death sentence for his own family. Panicked, Nick calls home to warn Helen and Lucas to stay inside and requests immediate police protection from Detective Wallace. When Nick arrives home, he begins locking all the doors and windows, which leaves his family in a state of confusion. Detective Wallace arrives soon after and confronts Nick about his action. She tells him that he is responsible for starting this retaliation and urges him to confess to the murder of Joe so the police can properly manage the situation. Later that night, while the family is asleep, Nick is awakened by a car alarm outside the house. He discovers that the two police officers assigned to guard the home have been killed by the gang. In a matter of moments, the gang members break into the house and begin searching for the family. Nick attempts to defend his home, managing to dodge several shots and wounding one of the intruders. However, the conflict ends abruptly when the gang captures Helen and Lucas. Billy then mercilessly shoots Nick, Helen, and Lucas. Nick survives the attack and eventually wakes up in the hospital. He is informed by the staff that while Lucas is alive in a coma, Helen has died from her injuries. Stricken with grief and guilt, Nick visits his comatose son and tells him that life does not follow the neat, balanced columns he once believed in. Nick tells Detective Wallace that the equation of life is sometimes just chaos. Determined to finish the conflict himself, he escapes the hospital by climbing out of his son's window while still under police protection. He returns to his home, which is now a taped-off crime scene, to prepare for a final confrontation. The next morning, Nick visits his bank and empties his account, taking all the money in cash. He meets with a coworker named Owen, who helps him track down a phone number the gang used to contact him. This lead takes him to the Four Roses bar, where he encounters a hostile bartender. Nick uses physical force to intimidate the bartender and another patron who tries to intervene. Through this aggression, he obtains the address of Billy's father and the location of an illegal weapons supplier. Nick travels to a secluded auto shop owned by a man named Bone. Bones is a black market gun dealer who initially shows little interest in helping Nick. However, after seeing the large amount of cash Nick has brought, he agrees to sell him several firearms. Nick purchases a .357 Magnum revolver, a Colt .45 semi-automatic pistol, and a double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun. During the transaction, Bones reveals that he is actually the father of Billy and Joe. Despite this relationship, Bones allows Nick to leave with the weapon. He explains that he believes Billy should face the consequences of his actions for operating without his father's permission. Nick returns home to prepare for what he considers a suicide mission. He practices using the new firearms to become familiar with their operation. In a symbolic transformation, he shaves his head and puts on Brendan's black leather jacket. Nick then tracks one of the gang members to an apartment. He breaks into the room using his shotgun and forces the man to reveal the location of the rest of the gang. Nick coerces the man into calling Billy on the phone. While Billy is on the line, Nick shoots the gang member at point-blank range to send a message. Meanwhile, Bones meets Billy under a freeway to warn him about Nick's plans. Bones criticizes his son for his constant failure, leading Billy to shoot and kill his own father. Billy takes his father's car and heads back toward the gang's main headquarters, an abandoned hospital they call the office. This building serves as a hideout where the gang manufactures various drugs, including marijuana and crystal meth. Nick arrives at the location in a stolen car and spots a van parked outside with a gang member inside. Nick rams the van with his vehicle at high speed, splitting the van in half and killing the occupant instantly. He then enters the building, using his 12-gauge shotgun to kill another gang member. As he moves through the facility, he chases down a third member and shoots him, blasting him through a window. Two more gang members appear and pursue Nick up a staircase. From the floor above, Nick uses his .45 pistol to wound one of them before finishing him off with a shotgun blast. Billy arrives at the hideout shortly after to find that the majority of his gang has already been killed by Nick during the gun battle. The two continue to exchange fire through the walls of the building. Another gang member is killed during this exchange when Nick hits him with a shotgun blast. Nick eventually enters a former church sanctuary within the hospital, which is bathed in red light from the stained glass windows. Billy emerges and shoots Nick in the side, while Nick manages to return fire and wound Billy in the chest. Billy's right-hand man, Bodie, appears behind Nick and shoots him through the neck. Nick quickly whirls around and kills Bodie with a shot to the head. Both Nick and Billy continue to fire at each other until they both run out of ammunition. Exhausted and bleeding heavily, the two men sit together on a church pew. Billy looks at Nick's transformation and remarks that Nick now looks like one of them. Without speaking, Nick produces a hidden .357 revolver from his jacket and cocks the hammer. He asks Billy if he is ready, and Billy simply sighs. At dawn, Nick is seen staggering out of the building alone, having finalized his revenge. Nick returns to his home in the gang's Mustang and parks it on the front lawn. He is severely injured, dragging his leg and holding a bandage to his neck while blood stains his face. Inside, he turns on the television to watch an old home video of his family celebrating together. Detective Wallace arrives at the house and informs Nick that Lucas has started moving and is expected to survive. Nick shows a sign of relief as he continues to watch the footage of his wife and sons. Finally, Nick slumps over on the couch and closes his eyes.